Welcome back to Echo Ridge and another episode here in our farm series. Today we're going to be taking a break from the chaos and trying to reinvent the Pacu plank. For those of you newer to the channel and not sure what I mean by the Pacu plank, it's a system that looks like this. And its whole point is being able to provide an infinite amount of Pacu. In this specific example, we're up to 208 Pacu, and we were using them to feed the angry tree. You have a breeder tank that are fed either seeds or algae, and they continuously lay more and more eggs. And then all the Pacu in here would also end up laying eggs. Now we've gone through a couple of revisions of the Pacu plank, but this design no longer works thanks to an update recently made by Clay. And all the update really did was made it so the Pacu in this tank, because there's not enough room for them, are now getting the confined debuff, which reduces their happiness by 10, which crushes that reproduction rate. So the Pacu in here will no longer infinitely reproduce. In a normal situation, these Pacu reproduce pretty quickly, at a rate of 67% per cycle. Or in other words, one egg for each breeder Pacu every 1.3 cycles. Those eggs would end up coming to the tank, get sorted, and then eventually hatch and drop into this infinite pool right here. And prior to the patch, when they were not getting the confined buff, they would still lay an egg before they ended up dying of starvation. Now, they will no longer lay that egg. So instead of your Pacu numbers continuously going up and up, you are going to be limited by a set amount based on how many eggs these 4 Pacu can lay in that same time. Now, there's nothing to say that you can't have 8 Pacu in your breeder tank. We just chose 4 in this specific example because we were feeding them algae and some seeds that we had locally. Let's head back to the farm and see if we can't create the Pacu Plank V2. Now, before we get started on Pacu Plank V2, a couple of quick updates around the colony. I managed to get all the ethanol gas out of here, so this system is now fixed and cleaned from the last dumpster fire. We are still working on improving the carbon dioxide to steam ratio inside of our dirty brick. Yes, we're still trying to clean up the wonderful water tanks, hence the reason why I'm staying in ×3 and ×10 speed this episode, even during the introduction, because, well, this is a giant mess and we have a lot of work. I did receive a couple of decent ideas that one way to do this would be to build the walls all the way up beyond the water. Sort of building a tunnel, and that way we can get back down in here and clean this mess back up. So I'll be doing that off screen. We've still been accomplishing even more digging, although I'm not quite sure where all this water and polluted water keeps coming from. Hopefully we don't have any other leaks, or something I'm just not aware of. We also have a bunch of errant gases everywhere, hydrogen, polluted oxygen, and of course the ever-growing carbon dioxide cloud. We are doing some carbon skimming, but eventually we're going to have access to space, and then we'll really be able to clean up the entire farm area. Now, to start with the Pacu plank, you're going to need, well, Pacu to prime it, and that's what we have these little fellas here. You're also going to have a requirement in order to be able to feed the breeders. As a reminder, you could use algae at only 7.5 kilos per cycle, and they would give you back 3.75 kilos worth of polluted dirt. Unfortunately, maintaining a supply of algae is not normally the easiest to do. So I prefer to go the seed route, and that works perfect here on the farm because we have plenty of seeds coming from all these dust caps, not to mention all the seeds from the mealwood that the Drecos are feeding on. And eventually, once we get the chlorine gas vent fixed, we'll be able to run dash of salt vines and balm lilies, which our friend the Pacu will also consume. I suppose step 1 is going to be figuring out a location. It is a fairly large system. I'm going to try to make improvements to shrink its blueprint size, but I'm thinking right here might be a pretty good location. We'll make sure we have a convenient spot for the dupes to drop off at. In fact, we haven't added another transit tube access point in a little while, so why don't we place one right here? And we already have a transformer line that's only running 1 transit tube access, so we'll just extend this power line and hook it right up. Now, in deciding how many breeders that we're going to use, which is going to determine the size of the main breeder tank, we need to look at how our seed supply is doing currently, or at least what we think our seed supply is going to do in the far future. Each Pacu will eat 1 seed per cycle, and if we look at the mealwood specifically, we know they only take about 3 cycles to mature, and then which we get a chance to get a seed. Remember, that chance is based on a duplicant's skills. In this case, Colonel Sanders has an agriculture skill of 12, which means their seed chance is 40%. Now, because this is the farm series, well, everybody's going to be a farmer, so their agriculture skill is going to be quite high. So I think long term, I can estimate that we're going to be able to get a seed 50% of the time every 3 cycles. We can take that estimation further and say that we are, quote, guaranteed to get a seed every 6 cycles. So in this case for the mealwood, with about 7 plants, when they're all growing normally, I need this wheezewort to do a little bit more work. In fact, why don't I just put the wheezewort over here? It might get closer. Of course, these are halted too, so that's not going to work. So I think we're going to end up putting a wheezewort here and a wheezewort here. And we'll take this one out and make this a mealwood, see if that works. But as I was saying, so if we estimate that we have about 6 mealwood plants, we can say this is enough seeds for at least 1 Pacu. Our dust caps, on the other hand, take 7.5 cycles, which means it'll take us 15 in order to be guaranteed a seed. With us running 28 dust caps, we can sort of presume that we're going to get at least 2 Pacu's worth of seeds every cycle from this little farm. So far, it looks like we have 3 total seeds to work with, which means we can run 3 Pacu. With all that being said, though, we're sitting at 4,752 seeds. So we have quite a bit in the backstock to hold us off until we get to a point where we do have a bomb lily garden and more plants in and around the colony. Oh, that's not even to mention the thimbleweed seeds as well. Now, granted, this thimbleweed does not grow at a normal rate because it is just taking excess polluted water from the bathroom systems. It's still more seeds. Another seed that they will eat, though, is the blossom seed. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we have access to the blossom seed. Berry blossoms would have been great because we have a decent supply of water that we could just keep feeding to berry blossoms, creating more and more seeds. But I'm sure eventually we may even get a blossom seed out of the pod. In this case, we're just going to take the pufflet eggs, as there are no ranchers or farmers from this selection. So with all that seed talk behind us, I feel comfortable running 8 Pacu. I'm just going to have to be cognizant of that and make sure that I do start making these gardens sooner rather than later. So to get started, we're going to build a 64 tile tank. The reason why it's 64 is because each Pacu requires 8 cells of space, which turns out to be a nice little square with 8 by 8 dimensions. We're also going to be using insulated tiles because while the Pacu do have a decent livable range from -20 to 80, we still have to be cognizant of the fact that we don't necessarily want them to lay a bunch of tropical fry eggs. It's not a big deal because in the infinite portion of the Pacu plank, it doesn't matter what type of fish they're laying because we end up racking, sorting, and stacking them. But we still want the majority of fry eggs, so we have to keep the temperature below 35 degrees. Right now, this area is 33 degrees. Oh, you're gonna get stuck, Patrick. But right now, the temperature around here is only sitting at around 37 up here, 32 down here. But we have a lot of heat up here, so I don't want that water to get much warmer than the 33 degrees that it's sitting at right now. So there is also a chance that we may need to provide some active cooling here in the far future, but for now this will do, especially considering we're going to be sourcing it with water that's sitting at 20 degrees anyways. Which we have a nice little pipe right here, so we will just bring it up and start dropping it off. And while I work, we'll fill this whole tank up. Now in a normal Pacu ranch, you would need a fish release. In this case, we are not going to be using it. The plank is going to be providing all the fish back in here. We will still need the fish feeder though. Unfortunately in this wonderful square though, it's going to look a little wonky for now and it's going to be positioned right about here. We'll use some cobalt ore because I have plenty. I like to make sure that the fish feeder is located away from walls because while I'm not sure if it's still the case, the fish pathing can get a little wonky when they try to swim up to try to get a seed or some algae from the fish feeder. I think in the interest of time, I'm also going to use some bottle emptiers. We'll enable auto bottle on these, and that way the dupes can also drop off some water, because right now this is going to take quite some time. Plus, we have some idle dupes every once in a while, so it's a good thing to put them to work. Now for the design of the upper area. I'm not 100% sure how this is going to turn out, so give me a few minutes to play with a couple of designs, and I'll update you in a few minutes. While I was working on the updated design, of course more bad things have happened. This insulated liquid pipe has now broken. This has been happening to thermo aqua tuner setups in all of my playthroughs. I know it was not the polluted water getting too cold or too hot and flashing and then breaking the pipes, so I'm not exactly sure what is happening here. If you've seen this in your playthroughs or have any ideas of why this is continuously happening now, please let me know in the comments below. At this point, I'll take theory crafting, and it might help me find the answers so I can pass it on to all of you. Another nice update is we finally finished cleaning out all the excess yuck out of the brine tank, so we're getting ready to seal this back up and then dropping the whole tank again. That'll be exciting. As we were looking at before inside the database, the Pacu, we're going to get the confined tag when a room is smaller than 8 cells, as we showed in the old Pacu plank example earlier in this episode. But that doesn't tell the complete story. As I indicated before, Clay made a recent update. This one happened to come in the Pack Snacks update, and it's what ultimately broke the Pacu plank original design. And the big key is in this sentence right here. Pacus now only check surrounding liquid volume to determine if they are confined. It's not necessarily the room itself. So when we take that into account, the old system of leaving all the fish in one single tile is just never going to work again. So what do we do to solve this? Well, in your playthroughs, you can build a giant tank that gives the Pacu enough room in order to keep breeding. In this case, it would be 420 tiles if we built a tank this size, and then divide it by the 8 tiles per Pacu, which means we'd be able to store a little over 50 Pacu here before they eventually became confined and they'd no longer reproduced until they get back under that number. In my specific case, I happen to have 4 pretty large tanks available to us, and that's what I've started to build out. This auto sweeper is going to grab all of the eggs and is going to make a quick stop at this conveyor chute, more on that automation later, and then ride the rail all the way down to the bottom of the map, where we eventually get over to the tanks. Now I'm going to be splitting the Pacu between 3 different tanks: the saltwater, the brine, and the regular water. You want to stay away from the polluted water, and that's due to the evil gulpfish. The gulpfish end up cleaning the polluted water and turning it into regular water. That's not going to work for us. But because, for instance, our giant brine tank has about 1,120 tiles worth of surrounding liquid, not counting these little offsets here, it means this tank by itself is going to be able to hold over 140 Pacu before they start self-regulating and will no longer reproduce until enough of them die off until we get under that number again. Either way, if I can sustain, let's say, 400 Pacu, all from those 8 breeders, that's going to provide us plenty of eggshells and fish fillets for a long time to come. Now you may notice that I've started putting in mesh tiles in the tanks as well. And the reason why is because if you had 100 Pacu in here, all swimming in 8 different directions, your frames would quickly drop. And especially considering I plan on running a whole lot more Pacu than that, you kind of want to make sure they can only swim around in one tile. While the surrounding liquids aren't impacted by mesh tiles or doors. So that's the reason we're going to be sealing the fish in around the conveyor chute. This is Future Echo. Yeah, this idea is not going to work. Just stay tuned. It's just a little bit of chaos. But don't worry, we get it working out in the end. Kinda. We have an auto sweeper in here that's going to be able to get anything we need out. And then we're just going to add another conveyor loader system with even more expensive rails. And it's going to take the long trip all the way back up to the top of the colony, where we'll eventually be able to drop it off right in our kitchen. In the future, we'll be able to sort the Pacu fillets from the eggshells and drop all the eggshells here automatically. Oh dear goodness, this is only getting worse. What is going on with all the steam? It looks like our water supply that eventually makes its way all the way over to the carbon skimmer is running a little short. So what I've done is added a bridge from this secondary line that offsets this one. Whenever it's not producing a full 10 kilos of water, because a desalinator needs to be emptied, this pump here will offset the difference. It also didn't make it any better that the line that we're filling the Pacu tank with, well, it's heading off to the main spom. Let's kill two birds with one stone and come off the oil line instead. There we go. That's giving us a much better flow rate. Now it's time to work on the automation. One of the benefits of the Pacu plank is that the dupes don't manually have to move the eggs around. And I'd like to keep that in this new updated design, even if it's definitely not as compact as I was hoping. So we're going to start with a critter sensor. The critter sensor is going to sense when there is less than 8 fish in here. When there is, and there's not already an egg waiting to hatch sitting on this weight plate, we're going to shut this conveyor chute. When the conveyor chute is shut, all the remaining eggs are going to head down to our giant new aquariums. There is one other issue though, and that is in the fact that we only want regular Pacu fries to end up in this conveyor chute. So for that reason, we're going to have to use a solid filter. Now the issue with this rail design right now though, is the fact that things that are not being sorted out by the filter would end up splitting 50-50 and head off towards this conveyor chute. So we're also going to need to add a bridge that provides directional control. We'll take the solid filter and set it to fry eggs so we only get the regular eggs heading up towards the conveyor chute. And remember, we still need the bypass here connected, because what's going to happen is the fish in here will lay multiple eggs before this egg has a chance to hatch. But we only want one egg ever sitting on this weight plate. We'll set the critter sensor to below 8, and when it is below 8, it'll send a green signal. And when we find a fry egg, we can see that it weighs 4 kilos. So if there is a fry egg on the weight plate, we'll say anything above 3 kilos send a green signal. And then we'll just use a wonderful AND gate, tie in the critter sensor, tie in the weight plate, and then connect in the conveyor chute. I needed to make sure the weight plate says below 3 kilos, send a green signal, because that means there's no fry egg sitting on it. You don't want to set it to 0 kilos for the simple reason that when an egg does hatch, there is going to be an eggshell there. So you don't want it to falsely trigger the weight plate. Now I've loaded up in our icky yellow storage bin 1,768 seeds worth of mealwood seeds and fungal spore seeds. So we'll go into our fish feeder and select mealwood seeds and fungal spore seeds. On our conveyor loader, we'll select the gulp fry eggs. Hopefully we've discovered a tropical fry egg. We have, and then a standard fry egg. Now it's time to just put some Pacu in here. Right now we're only about half full, so we could only hold 4 Pacu. And I just happen to have a little safe deposit box worth of Pacu right here. Let's see if we can move them the standard way. It looks like we can because the move here target is white. Now they're not going to be able to eat until the water levels get high enough so they could reach the fish feeder. But once they do, after a few cycles, they'll end up being tame and then start producing eggs. I'm going to fast forward this a little bit so I can give you some results once this whole system is working. I'm going to let the dupes finish dropping off the water manually using the bottle emptiers because we do need to seal this room off, and that way the critter sensor will end up detecting just the Pacu and not the 80 critters sitting around the map that it sees. And for convenience, I think I'm going to have this conveyor loader pick up all the eggshells and the Pacu fillets. Yeah, they'll take a trip all the way down here, only for these auto sweepers to do the same thing and send them back to the kitchen. But that way I don't have to make another rail run. As luck would have it, we finally found another duplicate to add to the farm. This Hassan is a decorating farmer who, just like any farmer, likes to get up early in the morning and start working. Unlike most farmers though, this one has critter aversion. Either way, Hassan's gonna work out. Welcome to the farm, duplicate number 22, Mordrake. I wanted to show you the automation in action. Notice that the critter sensor is detecting that there's less than 8 critters in here, and it is sending out a green signal. But since we've already had a fry egg sitting on the weight plate's sending out a red signal. So all the remaining eggs are going to bypass this chute. Now I know this doesn't end up looking like a Pacu plank. There is no plank save for the little weight plate. So maybe it's the Pacu mini plank. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below if you can think of a better name for what this new fish system that requires massive aquariums. I'm not saying that to diminish this design though, because in some ways I like it even better than my old one. With this new design, we can predict and maintain an exact amount of Pacu, and we can do the math to figure out how many Pacu we need to support how many dupes. Let me show you how. When a tame Pacu is not being fed, it'll end up dying after about 20 cycles. Not before, as long as they're not confined, laying an egg. And we know at the end of that 20 cycles, we're going to be given 1,000 kilos worth of Pacu fillet. So that means 20 Pacu equals 1 duplicant's worth of food per cycle. So if you're supporting 12 dupes on your colony, you know you need 12 times the 20 Pacu, which easy math tells us that's 240 total Pacu that we need to be able to maintain in order to feed 12 duplicants. Well, if each Pacu requires the 8 tiles before they end up getting confined, that means we would need a tank at least 1,920 tiles large. And as reference, these two tanks combined are about 2,900, so a 1,900 tile tank is about this size here. So yes, the system is not as powerful as it was before Clay made the patch. You can at least plan and design a system to support however many dupes you want. I did discover a flaw with the design though. Because these fry eggs require 5 cycles before they hit incubation, we're going to need to change the weight plate a little bit, because 1 egg at a time is not going to be enough. So I'm going to raise this to below 5 kilos to ensure that we get 2 eggs at a time. And the only time I want that to happen is when we're below 7, because when there is only 6 critters in here, we will still get 2 eggs sitting on this weight plate. They'll eventually hatch and make the whole tank an even 8. But I think considering this system doesn't take any duplicant labor, it makes up for the fact that, yes, it looks like you have to start building giant aquariums too. Okay, major flaw in the plan. This Pacu is cramped because I failed to take into account that you have to keep the egg separated from the Pacu to not get the cramp debuff. Well, the cramp debuff reduces the reproduction rate by 100%. So, yeah, let me take a quick think of this. Okay, well, I've got it worked out, and it's different, but it's gonna be okay. We're just not gonna seal in the Pacu on 1 tile, and this is no big deal, other than the fact that, we're gonna have Pacu swimming everywhere. Now, for the record, it does look like Clay has made a lot of improvements with the critter movement algorithms, because I'm sitting at about 90 frames per second. Granted, I do have a pretty decent rig, but as you can tell, this is a lot of Pacu. And you'll notice, they're not cramped, nor are they confined. Now in this first tank, because I'm only sitting at 160 tiles worth of water, I've put a critter sensor in here, limiting the amount of Pacu to 20. Whenever there is more than 20, this conveyor chute shuts, and that way the remaining Pacu go to these other tanks, which are much larger. And all of these Pacu, despite not being fed, are still reproducing at a base rate of 7% per cycle. So they will lay an egg, as evidence of the floor littered with fry eggs, before they end up starving. To pick up all of the eggshells and Pacu fillets, we've just put the auto sweepers here on the bottom, and they load everything into the conveyor loaders where they make the long trip back to our base. It's not as clean as I was hoping for, but I'll be honest, the system still works really well. I have 57 Pacu in this room, 70 in this room, and 22 in this one. And they'll continue to get repopulated whenever it needs, thanks to our wonderful little breeder aquarium up here. I appreciate you hanging with me as we tried to figure out a new system, and I hope you're still enjoying the farm series. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say in the comments below. So until next time, much love, happy gaming, and I'll talk to you soon.